The chamber walls hold the silence of a tomb, but soon they will only hold the screams of a boy coated in gold that isn't gold. Imagine this. The air is thick and still, deep beneath the palace floor. You're a guard, handpicked for a midnight task. Your orders are simple. Bring honey. 20 jars. Speak of this to no one. You stand in the gloom, torchlight dancing, as servants smear the sticky amber substance over a child's bare skin. He's been trained to stillness, but his eyes betray him, wide with a terror so deep it has no sound. Then you hear it, a rustling, scratching, living murmur from clay pots set around the room. Inside them, creatures. Scarabs starved for a week. Fire ants from southern sands, their venom a known agony. Hornets bred for a singular, vicious purpose. But there's a final vessel, separate from the rest. What it contains is a secret so vile, it would be purged from Egypt's memory for millennia. The old king enters. He is nearing a century in age, ruler since his own childhood, having buried generations of his heirs. His name is Pepi II. What unfolds now was systematically erased from official histories, yet whispered in priestly circles and hinted at in mass graves that still turn archaeologists pale. With a frail wave of his hand, the lids are lifted. The beetles come first, a creeping, clicking tide of dark shells ascending the gleaming body. Their jaws, meant for carrion, find softer fare. The boy's composure shatters into frantic muscle twitches. Next the ants. They flow in searing rivers, each bite a pinpoint of fire tracing the honey's path. When the hornets descend, the child's face is already swelling, morphing into something grotesque and inhuman. The wails that bounce off the sealed walls aren't just from pain. They're from the horrific understanding that this is a show. That the withered figure on the throne leans forward not in disgust, but in rapt study, sometimes calling out instructions. More on the left flank. Let the beetles work longer. This torment lasts for hours. The boy will live, barely. He'll be nursed by physicians, not out of compassion, but because he represents a significant investment. He will heal just enough to endure it again. And again. He is one of an estimated 50,000 children who vanished into the depths of Pepi's kingdom over his 9-decade reign. But to grasp how a boy king became history's most prolific predator, to see how a nation bid itself to feed a single man's darkest hunger, you must first understand a truth scholars often overlook. Pepi too was not born a monster. He was engineered by limitless power, early trauma, and a lifetime without any check on his will. This isn't merely ancient history. It is a recurring blueprint for what happens when absolute authority meets absolute corruption. This is the story of a damaged child made divine, a god made malignant, and how the silent absence of thousands of boys collapsed the world's foremost empire. If you're fascinated by history's darkest, most suppressed chapters, make sure to subscribe to Winds of Thought. Now, let's find the origin point. Every tyrant has a beginning. For Pepi II, it started in 2278 BC with a swift series of convenient deaths. His father, Pepi I, succumbed to a reported scorpion sting. A curious feat for a scorpion that passed 14 centuries, for barred doors and 2 sleeping tasters. Stranger still, Pepi's elder brother, the crown prince, died of river fever that same week, despite having been in a waterless desert for months. This left the youngest son, little Neferker, Pepi, a boy deemed so irrelevant he received no royal tutoring. In 7 days, he would be drenched in blood, declared a living god, and unlock a darkness within himself that would fester for 94 years. The coronation rite was meant to symbolize a mortal's transformation into the divine. But what occurs when the subject is a 6-year-old who cannot separate ritual from reality? What happens when a child truly believes he has become a deity? The ceremony started at dawn. Priests stripped the boy bare before the assembled court. A pristine white bull was led forth, its throat slit with ceremonial precision, its blood funneling into a vast golden basin. While the beast's eyes still fluttered, they immersed the child in the warm gore. They held him under until his small body convulsed for air, then pulled him back, expecting tears, screams, a call for his mother. Instead, Pepi giggled, a pure, joyful sound. He gazed at his crimson hands with wonder, tasted the blood, and asked if he could go under again. An aged priest later wrote that in all his years, nothing chilled him like that blood-masked smile. Now came the test of divine right, command over life and death. A condemned man was forced to his knees before the blood-soaked child. They handed Pepi a heavy bronze blade. His task, sever the head. Prove that God's power flows through you. The first swing missed, the weight toppling the boy. The court held its breath. Would he break? Pepi stood, studied the weapon, adjusted his grip. The next blow gashed the prisoner's shoulder. The next shattered bone. It took 11 strikes to finally sever the head. By then, the man had long since died, but the child pharaoh continued, learning with each impact. Then he did the unthinkable. He lifted the severed head, peered into its glazed eyes, and whispered. When asked what he said, Pepi replied, I asked what death tastes like. It cannot speak, but I know. It tastes like power. A 6-year-old, bathed in blood, philosophizing about the flavor of mortality. This wasn't trauma. It was an awakening. The ritual wasn't over. 23 of his father's secondary wives stood before him, destined for the tomb. Tradition dictated a quick poison. The new god king wanted a slower education. He ordered them strangled with silk cords, slowly, with pauses to let them revive. For 4 hours, he watched, feet dangling from a throne too large, his eyes missing nothing. He was a student of the final moment. Then came his 41 half-siblings, potential rivals. The boys were killed. The girls were given a choice in the heart of their grief: serve him forever, or join their mothers. 6 chose servitude. They would later regret that choice. One survivor described how, even as a child, Pepi was a connoisseur of fear. He kept them in a secluded wing, visiting at odd hours just to observe their terror. He was fascinated by what he termed the quiet of the soul, the instant when overwhelming dread shuts down the mind. By 8, he was experimenting with paralytics, scrolls detailing his findings on suffering. By 9, he had a revelation. Pain had varieties, like flavors. Burning differed from cutting, which differed from poison. He began cataloging types of agony as a scholar would, calling it his life's work. At 10, during a state meeting about famine and war, a cat caught a sparrow in the throne room. The bird was wounded, fluttering. Pepi halted all affairs of state for an hour to watch nature's cruelty unfold. When a counselor dared suggest resuming, Pepi had him beaten unconscious. The pharaoh's gaze was holy. To divert it was blasphemy. When the bird died, Pepi fed the cat from his own plate and declared all cats sacred for demonstrating his great truth. Death is a process to be studied. At 11, a letter to a general reveals his evolving pathology. The general was bringing a pygmy dancer from Nubia. Pepi's instructions were meticulous. Check on the dwarf 10 times each night. If he died en route, the crew's children would be fed to crocodiles. If he escaped, the soldiers would be impaled. But a postscript revealed more. Bring also a normal child of the same weight. Pepi wanted to compare their endurance, their pain responses, their screams. The dwarf was not a gift. He was a specimen. By 16, observation wasn't enough. He needed direct participation. It began with blessings for servant sons, conducted in private. Children entered whole and left broken. When a noble family protested their son's mutilated return, Pepi declared the boy had undergone a sacred transformation. The family was invited to the palace for compensation. They vanished. This crisis birthed a new office, the overseer of royal diversions. Its true purpose was procurement. A man named Ketty, selected for his moral vacancy, built a network of scouts, transporters, and physicians. Criteria were exact: boys aged 8 to 14, specific heights, weights, even vocal tones. Pepi's hearing was fading, and he preferred higher-pitched screams. The infamous honey ritual crystallized when Pepi was 52. He'd seen workers swarmed by insects after a honey spill and had a revelation. Here was suffering sourced from nature itself, torture that could be framed as divine will. The first chamber was a single sealed room. It soon expanded into a complex of 9, each with a specialized horror: a beetle pit, a serpent room, a recovery ward, a disposal area. The honey was engineered, mixed with saliva, tears, and the pheromones of fear to drive insects mad. The creatures were weaponized: scarabs starved on meat, ants bred for venom, hornets agitated by smoke. A session was a calculated performance. The selected boy, drugged not for mercy but to maintain consciousness, was lathered in the special honey. Restraints allowed for writhing, a key part of the spectacle. Insects were released in waves. Pepi watched from his platform, directing the agony like a conductor. More honey on the feet. Concentrate the beetles here. Survivors were medically patched for reuse. Some endured this dozens of times. By the 70th year of his reign, Egypt had restructured itself around this appetite. Regions that should have grown grain grew flowers for honey production, even as the Nile failed and people starved. The bureaucracy of evil was vast: regional directors, provincial coordinators, village scouts. Families scarred their sons, broke their bones, anything to make them unsuitable. Villages reported fake plagues, drownings, jackal attacks. None of it worked. Governors who failed were executed. Resistance groups like the Fathers of the Lost attacked convoys. Pepi's response was to subject their entire male lineages to prolonged ritual torture, forcing families to watch. One village chose mass suicide. Scouts took the boys' corpses anyway. Pepi displayed them honey-coated in fury. Internationally, Egypt became a pariah. Trade routes shifted away. Foreign tablets called it the land where children enter palaces and do not leave. The military rotted as men refused to serve. The priesthood of Ammonius stopped saying Pepi's name. By his 90s, the numb king required ever greater stimuli. The complex grew to 27 chambers. Multiple sessions ran concurrently, creating a cacophony of suffering. Procurement was failing. Provinces were emptied. Soldiers now conducted naked raids, taking any boy who could walk. The final recorded session, described by a fleeing guard, involved 40 boys and creatures bred to unnatural size. It lasted from dusk till dawn. None lived. 3 days later, Pepi too died in his sleep, clutching honeycomb, his face fixed in an expression of endless hunger. He had ruled 94 years, consumed an estimated 50,000 young lives, and never faced a consequence. His death triggered not mourning, but frenzied obliteration. Records were burned, inscriptions chiseled away, the honey chambers filled with rubble and sealed. The surviving boys were walled inside their dormitories and left to die. His successor's main duty was erasure. Even Pepi's mummification was sabotaged. Priests placed live insects within his wrappings to consume him. His pyramid was deliberately built to collapse, which it did, crushing his sarcophagus. Egypt shattered. The old kingdom ended. Irrigation failed, knowledge scattered, and generations were missing. The demographic wound never fully healed. This is the price of power left unchecked for a lifetime. The pattern is not unique. Tiberius, Gilles de Rice, Elizabeth Bathory, all mirrors of this darkness. But Pepi's scale was industrial. He turned atrocity into administration, making a civilization complicit. The haunting lesson is that this blueprint repeats. It repeats in private islands, in sealed court documents, in powerful men who operate beyond reach. The methods modernize, but the pattern of procurement, protection, and silence remains. That boy from the first moment, coated in deceptive gold, died in agony over 4 millennia ago. We don't know his name, but his silence, multiplied by 50,000, echoes as a warning. Their bones are the evidence. Their absence was the weapon that broke a kingdom. Monuments to tyrants crumble, but the truth in unmarked graves endures. It tells us that civilization is fragile, always one unchecked monster away from collapse. And that monster is never born. He is carefully, systematically made. If this journey into the darkest corridors of power resonated with you, please show your support. It helps the channel immensely. Leave a like, subscribe to Winds of Thought, and tell us in the comments which historical figure psychology deserves a deep dive next. Thank you for watching.